And welcome back to episode 22 of How to Survive 2025. I'm Dacia M. Arnold.
I am Jim Cobb.
And Brian Keene is the silent but ever present voyeur to this week's episode. Jim and I are discussing gear maintenance.
Yep. Gear maintenance is very important, and it ties into some of the things we've talked about in previous episodes, where you don't want to just buy things for the sake of buying them and throw them on a shelf. You want to take them out of the box, take them out of the package. You want to play around with them, get used to them, figure out how they work, their little quirks and all that. And as part of that, you want to know how to clean the things up after you're done, and you want to maintain them properly so that when the time comes that you need it for real, it does what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. I feel like we talk a lot about the importance of water, but water can ruin nearly everything.
Yep. The biggest dangers generally for anything you're storing are water, sunlight, temperature, and oxygen. Those are the things that'll deteriorate your goodies, your stuff. So you need to be able to protect against each one of those.
Now, the first thing I think when we talk about gear maintenance is something that I'm confident to say you're an expert on knives.
I don't like to use the term expert. I read a quote a long time ago. An expert is one who knows more and more about less and less. But yeah, I own a couple. I dabble. I probably own more knives than any 10 human beings will ever need in their lifetime. And that's not because, honestly, the knife thing isn't even because of prepping. It's a separate entity that just kind of dovetails nicely. I've been a knife collector longer than I've been a preparedness person. I just always had an affinity for them. I always thought they were cool. I've been collecting knives for well over 40 years. Along the way, I've learned the hard way that if you don't maintain them and you don't protect them from various things like water, they don't turn out very well in the long run. Now, and this applies for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. As a general rule, when it comes to gear, you get what you pay for. Okay. That said, I mean, there is an upper limit. With knives in particular, you reach a point where you're not paying for quality as much as you're just paying for the bells and whistles, the really fancy handle material, or the beautifully constructed sheath, things like that. Things that don't really impact the performance of the tool. They're just eye candy. Okay. But generally speaking, the higher quality products are going to cost a little more than the poor quality products. The poor quality ones you can get by with one or two uses, but over time it's going to start to be unreliable, even with maintenance. The higher the quality, the longer it's going to last, and the less maintenance it probably will require on a regular basis. Okay. So, for example, we're talking about knives. There are a bazillion different steels that are used in knife construction.
I would not have known.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And there are people out there. I mean, it's reached the point where we have people, we call them steel snobs, where they won't even consider buying a knife unless it's at least this level of steel. Otherwise, forget about it. It's junk, I'm not to that point, but I recognize that higher quality steels, such as one of the newest ones called Magna Cut, they're pricier than a cheaper made steel, but they also last a lot longer, and they're less likely to suffer from corrosion. They're going to retain the edge better, things like that. Keep in mind that in a survival situation, in a grid down situation, your resources are limited by what you have available to you immediately. You can't run to the store and get something else. You know, that's the whole point of preparedness. The edge of your knife is a perishable resource. Every time you use the knife, you're dulling it just a little bit. And depending on the quality of the steel, you might be dulling it a lot more than you would for a higher quality knife.
And depends on what you're using it on too. So like
Exactly.
there's a difference between hardwood and softwood
Yep.
that you're whittling away.
hmm And if you go on YouTube and you watch some of the more entertaining knife reviews, they'll take knives and try to, pound them through cinder blocks and things like that, and then complain it didn't hold an edge.
Oh.
Um, Personally, I'm not one for torture testing any products, particularly knives. I'm going to use a knife for what a knife is supposed to be used for. I'm not going to try to drive it through a cinder block and then wonder why the knife fell apart or why it's no longer sharp. You know, I think the people who make those videos aren't real sharp, but that's just me. Um,
Now,
so
do you need multiple knives for multiple uses, or can the knife you use to open a can be used to clean an animal?
the short answer is yes.
Okay.
You, um, I recommend you have a minimum of two knives. One, a folding knife that's easy for you to keep in your pocket so you have a sharp edge with you at all times. And then also a larger field knife, something you might put on your belt. Although I tend to pocket carry some of my smaller fixed blades. Um, a fixed blade is stronger than a folding knife because it doesn't have moving parts.
Mm.
It doesn't have a hinge that could possibly fail, and it's just inherently stronger. It's one piece of steel versus a piece of steel riveted or attached to something else. Okay. So I recommend a minimum of two. Some people will go so far as to say you should have an even larger knife for batoning firewood or clearing brush, things like
Mm.
that. I mean, okay, I don't have a problem with that, but at some point you reach a level where it's like, okay, do I really need to carry 87 different knives with me everywhere I go? You know, um, I say the minimum is one folding knife in your pocket, one fixed blade on your belt or somewhere else easily accessible. Now, when it comes to maintaining your knives, the single most important thing is knowing how to sharpen a knife. A dull knife is more dangerous than a sharp knife when we're talking about the user. And that flies in the face for a lot of people. Logically, that doesn't make sense. But as a practical matter, if the knife is dull, you're going to have to exert more force to make the cut into the material you're cutting. The greater the force that you're applying, the more likely something's going to slip and you're going to end up getting hurt. Whether the knife stabs into you or flies out and hits somebody else, whatever the case is. A sharp knife will cut easier, it'll cut
Mm.
cleaner, it'll cut with less effort, and there's less danger unless you're somebody like my wife who she does things with kitchen knives that drive me absolutely bananas. She will take a little mini pepper and she'll just freehand cut it over her plate like this. Now, bless her heart, she's never cut herself doing this, but I cannot watch this happen. This is one of those things where I just have to walk away.
So, Will, if you sharpen a knife and you put it in your hiking bag,
Mhm.
and your hiking bag say you don't touch it over the winter time and it comes summertime, do you need to resharpen that knife? It's going to stay sharp.
It should stay sharp. However, it storing a knife that way largely depends on the sheath that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
use. Now, the the most common sheath materials today are leather or Kydex. Kydex is a very stiff, hard plastic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, with a Kydex sheath, the knife will often, when you put it in the sheath, it'll like click or snap into place. You'll hear that. Firearm holsters are the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, a leather sheath can retain moisture. If it's really humid where you're storing it, it can transfer that moisture to the blade, and it could cause rust or other issues. A Kydex sheath doesn't do that. And in fact, some Kydex sheaths even come with a weep hole at the bottom,
Oh.
where if dampness gets into that sheath, it'll seep out through that weep hole at the bottom, and rather than keeping it up against the blade. My recommendation is number one, I like leather. I really do. I prefer it over Kydex for several reasons. One of the things you can do is oil your knife before you
Mm-hmm.
put it in the sheath. Mineral oil, just plain old mineral oil, is great because not only will it protect the blade, but you don't have to worry about contaminating food because mineral oil, I mean, you just wipe it
Mm.
off and you're fine to, cut up your beef or steak, whatever you have. If you use another protectant material, it may or may not be food safe.
Okay.
Now, another product that's out there that I do highly recommend is called Wicked Wax. Just fire up your favorite search engine and you'll find it easy. It's a protectant that you can apply to your sheath. You can apply it to other materials too, or I mean your blade, and you can apply it to other materials too, and it works really well. It's food safe. The guy who invented it and who markets it, Fred Depreet, is a great guy. He knows his stuff. He's been doing this for a long time. Wicked Wax is the name of the product. Just rub it on your blade, and it'll protect it from rust and other corrosion over time.
Awesome. So the next thing that I think of when we think of gear is anything vinyl or cloth. Really,
Yeah.
I think those things are like the next things to really have an effect and breaking down over time if you're not keeping an eye on them.
Yep. And they can develop mold and mildew.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us have run into that where we take our camping gear and throw it in the basement or the attic, pull it out the next season, and it's all funky and gross. What you can do, number one, I'm not a big fan of just storing things for months or years at a time myself. I want to take the stuff out on a regular basis, give it a good shakedown, make sure it's in good shape, and again, play around with it and use it a little bit. So, for example, like with a tent, let's say you've got a little tent, rather than just throwing it in the attic or the basement for a couple of years, make a point of 2, 3 times a year taking it out, setting it up in the backyard, let the kids play in it, maybe have a backyard camp out, that kind of thing. And we talked about that, I think the last episode when we
Mm-hmm.
talked about backyard camping and stuff. Um, when it comes to protecting it, there are all kinds of products out there that you can spray on or wipe on vinyl or other cloth to protect it. The brand names escape me at the moment, but if you go to a sporting goods store, a decent sporting goods store, not the one aisle at Walmart, but some place that specializes in camping gear and things like that, they'll be able to recommend all kinds of different products that are really great to use. They're easy. I mean, way back in the day, I think they used to use wax and things like that. And I mean, wax canvas is a thing that still exists today. I know a couple of companies that use it a lot for bags and pouches and that, but the downside is they can be heavy. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're not as lightweight as the ultra modern gear that you can find today. They're really great. They stand up well. PNW Bushcraft is one of my favorite companies on the planet. They got a whole line of wax canvas stuff that is built to last forever. I mean, it's pretty much bomb proof and it looks amazing.
Hmm.
But I'm not going to go out and buy a tent made out of wax canvas.
It's heavy.
Yeah, I'm not carrying that anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, another area of gear that we need to talk about is one that we don't really talk about that much on this show, but firearms maintenance.
Oh, hey, it's me.
With you, um, it how important is it to make sure your guns are cleaned?
Oh my goodness, your aim depends on if your weapon is clean or not.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're using a hunting rifle, if you're playing Rambo at the range with an AR, because that's
Mm-hmm.
the only thing you should be using that for, or if you have a handgun for home protection, you need to be cleaning it regularly. Now, they say some guns you don't need to clean after every use, and that usually about 250 to 300 rounds is when you should really buckle down and give it a good clean. I disagree. If I shoot something, I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to at least wipe it down. So, just an overview of how to care for a weapon, no matter
Mm-hmm.
what you have, is first make sure that you have a cleaning kit based on the caliber of the weapon you have.
Mm-hmm.
So this ensures that any brushes that you're going to send down the barrel fit and aren't going to get stuck and then ruin the bore of your barrel. It also will include a cleaner and a lubricant, and not all cleaners lubricate, not all lubricants clean. So
Okay.
if you're just starting out and you don't have any experience, I would use two different things for each purpose. So before you start cleaning your weapon, make sure it doesn't have any rounds in it. So you're going to drop your magazine, you're going to take your magazine out. If you have a rifle, you're going to pull back your bolt handle, remove any of the rounds that are in there. Once you drop your magazine, you'll pull back the charging handle or the slide. And if there's a round in your handgun or your rifle, it's going to pop out. Okay, then to make sure that the weapon indeed has no bullets in it, you are then going to ride the sliding or the charging handle forward. You're going to pull the trigger pointed at the ground. Never pull the trigger at anything other than a target or the ground when you're clearing
Mm-hmm.
your weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So once it's clear, you want to take it apart according to the manufacturer's instructions. This is really, really important. Don't take apart a weapon that is beyond what the instructions say, because you might not be able to put it back together. And two, if you put it together wrong, it could be very, very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You want to clean your barrel first. So with the brush that's in your cleaning kit, send a brush down there and send it all the way through. Absolutely never, ever stop halfway and pull it back out, because it could get stuck and then you're going to ruin the bore. A lot of people say you can send it down, all the way down, and then pull it all the way back in. But there are other professionals and specific weapons where you should only go the direction that the bullet's going in. For me, that makes the most sense to maintain accuracy. So push brush through, dry brush, and then you'll send your cleaner through. So only a couple drops of cleaner on a little patch. I don't recommend using cotton or
Okay.
any kind of particle cloth like linen that could leave dust or debris in your weapon, because you don't want anything left in there that didn't belong in there.
Mm-hmm.
So send your cleaner down, and then I would continue sending patches down your barrel until the barrel comes out. You're not going to want to eat off of it. It doesn't have to be completely clean, but if it's black, you need to keep going until it comes back relatively clean. And then if you don't plan on using your weapon again for like a month, like you went to the range and you're going to put it away for a while, I'd put 2 drops of lubricant on your patch, send it through one time
Okay.
for your barrel. For your charging pin, the hammer, depending on the type of weapon, you want to wipe that down again with like a cloth that doesn't have any debris. For carbon buildup or black patches that are hard to
Mm-hmm.
get up, you're going to use a brush, the same brush that you sent down the barrel. Get those up, wipe it off. Not all places need lube in your weapon, and you don't want to over lubricate your weapon either.
Mm-hmm.
So places that, like the railing that where the bolt slides in and out, you want to put lube there. Some weapons you do put lube on the spring, but most you do not.
Okay.
So make sure that you are familiar with that gun that you have And the
Mhm.
manufacturer's instructions, YouTube will take you a long way, as long as your cleaning kit is the right kind for your weapon.
Now, do you store magazines full or empty?
So if you do, so this is preference.
Hmm.
Um, you can store your magazines if it's for home defense.
Hmm.
If it is for home defense and you do want a full magazine nearby to lock and load if you need to, then they recommend not filling it up completely, but
Okay.
maybe like a quarter to a halfway, because what's going to happen is that spring is going to lose its spring. It's going to
Right.
become ineffective. It's not going to push your rounds out. You're going to jam in your magazine,
Yeah.
and it's going to be ineffective.
Okay. Okay. And like you asked about knives, let's say I clean my weapon. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
I clean my handgun
Mm-hmm.
and I put it in a case and I toss it up on a shelf. How long is it going to be in good condition, or will it remain in that condition pretty much indefinitely until I use it?
Yeah, so they recommend that you take down your weapon, kind of wipe it off, look in it, make sure like there's no moisture buildup once a month.
Okay.
They also recommend, even if you don't use it, that every 6 months you should deep clean your weapon. Um, if you go out, pop off 2 rounds, come back in, you don't need to do a deep clean like we just discussed. It's just a simple wipe through, make sure there's no carbon buildup. If you're going to leave your weapon for a long period of time, like a year,
Hmm.
um, go ahead, like I said, lube up the barrel, lube up the insides where metal's touching on metal, and store it that way. And then before you go back out, every time you go back out to shoot your gun, you need to wipe it down again.
Hmm.
Remove that lubrication that you set in there.
And I think that's important that people understand that firearms require a certain minimum amount of maintenance, which might be a whole lot more than they might realize given Hollywood and TV and books and things like that, where, you know, these guys will fire off hundreds of rounds and then just walk away and never think about it, you
I
know?
know. Well, like there's the dodo, like they overtake on guard duty, and I was like, that's the last weapon I would ever grab. That dude had his muzzle in the dirt. I'm not taking that thing to shoot. I don't think so. Muddy weapons are no good either.
No,
Like,
no.
no.
Well, unless it's an AK-47. Those apparently you can
We'll
just dump
shoot
in
through
the
anything.
ocean and, you're good to
Oi.
go. Um, but yeah, I mean, whether we're talking about firearms, knives, tents, whatever, it's really important you know how to clean
Mm-hmm.
and maintain these things so that they remain in good enough condition that in a crisis you can depend on them. You know, with electronics, don't ever store things with batteries in them.
Mm.
Oh, no, no. I mean, alkaline batteries. I'm not talking about the USB things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're talking about a little walkie-talkie or a radio or a flashlight, whatever the case is, don't throw the energizers in there, close it up, and throw it on a shelf. 6 months down the road, you're going to find out those batteries deteriorated and there's
Mm-hmm.
battery acid all over everything. Um, any parent probably found that out the hard way with their kids' toys. You
Oh yeah.
know, um, a better option is to store the batteries separately. And if you take that radio out to play with it for an afternoon, take the batteries out of it before you put it back on the shelf. Throw the batteries next to it. Um, the other thing that I recommend with electronics, anything that's rechargeable. I go at least on a 3 month rotation.
Quarterly. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Where I charge everything up, make sure it's all good to go, and then toss it on the shelf or in the drawer, or whatever the case is. Now, some of my electronics, I don't need to do that because I'm using them all the time.
Mm.
I've got a couple of battery packs for like cell phones, things like that. We use those things all the time when we're out on hikes or whatever the case is. So they're in constant rotation anyway, so I don't worry about those. But other things like backup flashlights, things like that, I make a point every quarter, take everything out, clean it all off, make sure it's not dusty or anything, charge it up, and then test it, make sure everything's working right, and then put it back into storage. That way I know, if I need it, it's there and it's going to work.
Now, we've talked before about like double checking your fire extinguishers and stuff like that actually have a gauge on it, but there's other like pressurized things that need to be checked. One thing that I think of is whenever we go hiking, we take bear mace.
Oh yeah.
Like, if you don't expel the bear mace, is it still pressurized? Is it still good? That's like the last thing I want to test, if I'm being honest. My mace, my purse mace, and my bear mace.
Yeah. I've been on the receiving end of pepper spray.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that again. Years ago, I tested a product called pepper balls, which are little plastic projectiles that when they hit, they explode with a cloud of this dust.
So it's like a paintball with pepper spray in it.
It basically, it's not bullshit. A liquid though. It's a powder that immediately it's a big cloud. Okay. I got on the bad end of one of those once, and no, pass.
Let's
0 out of 10. Do not recommend. As for how you check, I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. I would check for dates on the bottle and see, if it has a best by date. Otherwise, maybe every year or every couple of years, rotate it out for a new one just to be safe.
Yeah.
That's one thing I don't know how you test them without actually, pull the trigger and hold your breath.
Awesome. So just to recap, Jim, we talked about like how often we're going through all these things and doing maintenance and checking our gear and making sure that it's clear of water, clear of mold and mildew.
Yep.
It's not exposed to oxygen if it's not supposed to. Make sure your batteries are still worked and everything's charged. We want to do this probably every season. Change the seasons, whether you're putting it away or getting it out. Just double check it once a quarter. I would also switch out your clothes in your bug out bag. It'd be a great time to do that.
Yep. What I used to do was when the clocks changed for daylight saving, that weekend, I would make sure to take out the bug out bag or get home bag out of the trunk, swap clothes out, that kind of thing. Make sure the winter gear is in there for the winter season, take it out for the summer season, things like that.
All right, one piece of gear that's really, really important to every person, nearly every person listening, is your car.
Yep.
Oh, yep. Do you want to talk about cars, Jim? Do you know a lot about cars?
I've learned about cars not by choice. I've learned about cars because I've been broke and had to do things that, to get it back on the road. I was blessed. I've been blessed to have a father-in-law who is an ace mechanic. Not professionally. He just, he grew up working on cars. So, he taught me a thing or two. Some of the most important things you can do are make sure you're doing oil changes on the recommended schedule by the manufacturer. Make sure you are checking your fluids on a regular basis. Make sure you are not abusing your vehicle by driving at places where it really shouldn't go. If you have, a little Chrysler Sebring, it's not intended for off-road use. Okay. Make sure you're checking the tread on your tires. Make sure you're checking the PSI in your tires. A friend of mine, a young friend of our family, sent me a message just a couple days ago. She said, "Is the tire pressure in your back tires supposed to be the same as in your front tires?" And I said, "Well, they don't need to be on the dot, but they should be close." Why? Well, one of my tires is at 12.
Oh, bless her heart or their heart.
I said,
oh dear.
Yeah, you need to get that fixed.
Yeah.
You need to head to a gas station that has an air pump, and away you go.
I'm
Uh,
impressed that they knew how to use a tire gauge at all.
I think I don't know for sure, but I suspect that she has the tire monitor thing
I
in the
see.
dash that'll tell her. Um, we have one in our car that's malfunctioning, and it drives me
Mhm.
nuts because one of the tire sensors isn't responding. So this thing is constantly blinking
Ugh.
at me, even though I know the tires are fine. But it's also, a 15-year-old car with 160,000 miles on it. So I'm not really looking to spend a lot of money to get anything fixed. Um, but yeah, maintaining your vehicle isn't hard as long as you stay on top of it. Now, I'm from the generation where when a car hit 100,000 miles, you got rid of it.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Cars, more modern cars, they're designed where, 100,000 miles, they're just getting warmed up.
Hmm.
Okay. It's not uncommon these days to see cars with 250,000 miles on them and still running fine. Where, for me, I see a car, an ad for a car, it's got 200,000 miles on me. I'm like, nah, I want no part of that, you
Yeah.
know. Because when I was a kid, once it flipped over to 100, you're racing to find somebody who'll take it off your hands. Um, but even with minimal maintenance, cars
Hmm.
today will last a really long time. You just have to take care of them and stay on top of it. Don't let it slide and then have to pay the price later.
Yep. And just to round things out, we talk about you are more likely to bug in than bug
Mhm.
out. So make sure the things around your house are you do regular checks and maintenances on your water heater, your air conditioning,
Yep.
your heater system, your boiler if you have a boiler,
Hmm.
even your appliances, your refrigerators, your dishwashers are kind of a vanity thing.
Yeah.
Everyone can
Yeah.
hand wash
Yeah.
a dish.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Around the house, if you have generators or other
Mm-hmm.
equipment like that, make sure you're following manufacturer's instructions for how to maintain them, how to keep them in good working order, how to test them regularly.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Jackery solar generator with some solar panels, and we make sure, every I'm going to say every few months, we charge up that the battery in the or in the solar generator, because a solar generator is just a battery. That's
Mm-hmm.
really all it is. I know electrician types, it rankles them something fierce to call them generators when they don't really generate anything, but that's what the that's what the manufacturers call them, so that's the term we use. The solar generator is nothing more than a battery that we charge up using solar panels or other sources, and then it holds that charge, and we make use of it through its various outlets. Every 2 to 3 months, we'll take the Jackery out, top it off, maybe use it for this or that, just to take some of the power off, put some of the power back on, and then throw it back on the shelf in the storage so it's ready for the next time.
Mm-hmm.
We used ours not last year, the year before. We installed new siding on a detached garage we have, and because of the nature of the project, we had to cut the power to the garage.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've got all these power tools out there. We broke out the Jackery and had that running for a good 2 weeks while we ran that, while we did the project. Had it, hooked up to the solar panels, and it worked like a dream. It
Oh
was
wow.
outstanding.
Awesome. And I could think of probably a million and one other things that we use on a regular basis and that we maybe not consider doing maintenance on.
Well, I think the best rule of thumb is if you see a problem,
Mm.
take care of it right away.
Hmm.
Don't wait until it gets worse. Growing up, if I heard my car make a funny noise, I got rid of it by turning the radio up.
No,
Can't do that.
no, you cannot.
That's gonna come back to bite you.
Hmm. Awesome. These are really good points. Jim, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up today?
I'm gonna steal a line from you.
Oh,
It's gonna be okay.
It is going to be okay. And I think we are down to, I think, one more episode.
Well, Brian and I chatted a little bit prior to you joining us today. We're going to
Okay.
do two more
Ooh,
because this is episode 22.
it is.
I cannot end a show on 23. It just,
Okay.
it's going to drive me nuts forever. So we're going to do one more show and then a wrap up so that we actually end on episode 24.
Oh, awesome. So you get 2 more weeks of us, folks.
Yep.
And so join us next week on How to Survive 2025. Take care.